Will an SMS ID registry foil online scammers?
And can Aussie pirates be scared straight? Hey there, welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading journalists and commentators to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined by someone claiming to be Alex Kidman. Alex, why do you keep losing your phone overseas and asking me for money?
Me, Alex Kidman, definite. Need money. Send money now.
Yeah, that sounds legit. That definitely sounds legit. So while I wire Alex some money overseas, we're also joined again by one of our regular guests. It's Gizmodo Australia editor, Asha Barbaschow. But for some strange reason, she's demanding to be paid in iTunes gift cards. Asha, how do we know it's really you?
Because I sent a text saying that I was with Alex.
Oh, yeah, okay, that totally checks out. All right, this is 100% legit. I'll send you my banking details later.
Asha, with me. Send cryptocurrency now.
Hi, Mum.
This week, we're talking about new efforts to foil online scammers like these two, and also whether Aussie pirates can be scared straight by a new report from people who don't want you to pirate. But before that, Alex, what's happening on the Vertical Hold news desk?
So there's a bunch of news happening this week. Probably one of the biggest stories to happen recently is the Microsoft Activision deal. So this has been on the cards for a while. Microsoft was going to buy Activision for all the money, basically because Call of Duty makes all the money. But now UK regulators have basically said, no, it's not going to happen.
Why? Is this a surprise? Were we expecting it to go through without any complaints?
They sort of vacillated on whether or not they were going to let it happen or not let it happen. Their concern is essentially still an anti-competitive one, although Microsoft does have the right to appeal this, and given the sums of money involved, you've got to think that they will. Asha, is this going to crimp your Call of Duty gaming style?
Absolutely not at all. I mean, maybe 2 years ago when I still played Candy Crush, but I think I should be fine either way.
It was interesting they said that they were concerned that the merger would squash the cloud gaming market. Is there much of a cloud gaming market to squash, and would this deal have made a difference?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a cloud gaming market out there. In Australia, it's a little bit harder to see because we've been very latecomers to this because in shock news to everyone listening to this podcast, Australia's broadband isn't very good.
What?
But I know. It was stunning news to me too. But no, I mean, so Microsoft's obviously got its own cloud gaming stuff. You've got Nvidia in there. You've got Sony in there. And some of the franchises. Call of Duty is kind of the headline thing that Activision got, but it's certainly not the only thing. Some of those franchises really would have pushed Microsoft into a very, very dominant position. While we have seen failures in this market, like Google Stadia, for example, that doesn't mean that there isn't a market. And moving on to my favourite silly story of the week, which involves 90s Britpop mega band Oasis, or in this case, AI Aces. This is a weird story where an Oasis cover band used AI and a bunch of Liam Gallagher sound samples to produce a lost Oasis album. And the scary thing is, because they've used actual real voice samples, it doesn't sound 1,000,000% away from an Oasis track. And certainly looking at, I'm not a big Oasis fan myself, I'll say, but looking at some of the responses I've seen from Oasis fans, a lot of them kind of went, wow, this really does sound like them. This is great stuff. Adam, I know you're a man who's passionate about his music. How keen are you, 20, 30 years from now, to hear the AI Stones play?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't care so much about Oasis, but I'm concerned about who they're going to do it to next. And the bigger your back catalogue is, and the Stones are a good example, the greater chance that someone could do it. And no, just there's some things you've got to let go. One day the Stones will stop making music, and you've just got to deal with it because nobody needs that shit.
Asha, would you listen to AI produce music?
Look, for the lols, I am also a massive music fan myself. But look, this is a little bit off topic, but when I first heard of this, I couldn't help but remember the Weird Al song from years ago, where he just took a Bob Dylan kind of style song, and the whole song was made up of palindromes, individual palindromes,
yeah,
and it.
Bob. Great song.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one, and I just that's all I could think of. That it absolutely sounded like a Bob Dylan song, even though it was a parody of nonsense. But that's what this reminds me of, right? You take a band or an artist that has a very, very noticeable, specific vibe, and you can, especially if you're using their original voices, you can make it something new, I guess, as long as it stays in the funny rather than the real. But
the good news is that Keith Richards will outlive AI, so he'll have the last laugh.
So they'll never stop making Stones albums. But look, I'm going to throw the patented devil's advocate hat on here. What if an artist who doesn't have the voice, who's, getting on in years, the Stones are a good example, but there are plenty of others, who's getting on in years, doesn't have the voice that they had when they were in their 20s or 30s, goes, actually, I want to do this. How is that different to the kind of post-production that every album since ever has had? That studio sound is never quite the same as the concert sound. Is this just not, sound engineering?
No, it's not sound engineering, because sound engineering, you're taking what they put out and then manipulating it, whereas this, you're starting from scratch. And I know you're splitting hairs here, and you're right, a lot of musicians don't have quite the vocal range as they get a bit older, and you come to accept that. You go and see them in concert and you think, oh, they didn't quite hit that note the way they do on the album. But I think you can live with that and you can respect that. But doing it completely fake is going to lose.
Doing it by choice.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that they'll lose credibility if they do that. I don't think people are up for that.
Some of them just like the money. I mean, this is why the Stones are still touring. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You need the whole vibe of the band, right? You need the drums. You need everything in there. And I think just taking it. Not to say that musicians are replaceable, but if you can no longer play the guitar, the band can then go get a different guitarist. And I think that that's the same with vocals as well. Yes, you might be changing the band's sound or vibe, whatever, but you kind of maybe do that instead. Swap singers.
The Adam Lambert Queen thing.
Oh, that's maybe.
Or
you just stop.
They got another singer in. That was their choice. That was how they wanted to go. However, we should keep moving on. And I'll go from something that's obviously made Adam very unhappy to something that should make him really happy, a supply chain story.
Yes. Supply chain.
And I know, Asha, you've also written about this a little bit. Coles has gone automated for one of its distribution centres. So this is not quite the robot supermarket of the future. This is the robot distribution centre for the supermarket of now.
This shouldn't really come as a surprise, though, should it? As a lot of people are doing this.
Well, a few, maybe 2 weeks ago, and story to come, stay tuned to gizmodo.com.au. But a few weeks ago, I took Amazon up on an offer to tour its it's not called a warehouse. I think they're calling it distribution center or something to that effect, just like Coles is as well.
Bezos's happy beehive, basically.
Right. And there were these adorable little robots. There was a conveyor belt that if you laid it out, it'd probably reach the moon. It was a lot of fun to I'm not as much of a supply chain nerd as others here are, but it was still really cool to see that the part that tech can play. And so I guess it just makes some sense to bring in some elements of this, even though what exactly are Coles doing? I'm not too sure, Alex. Do you know exactly what they're doing?
Well, the point with this was that this was a fully automated distribution centre. And their press release talked an awful lot about the quantity of kilos, and it was some huge number, which I don't have to hand, that wouldn't have to be manually lifted. Now, I'm Adam, you're the supply chain expert, but I would think that the huge, multi-ton racks of tomatoes probably weren't being manually lifted in the first place. There's a forklift truck somewhere zipping around.
It's an awkward one because when you talk about these kind of backroom operations, Amazon, for example, cops a lot of flack for the way they treat people who work in these centers. And that's why they want to show you this thing and not show you employees who are forced to piss in a jar because they're not allowed to take a toilet break. So, but at the same time, you say, okay, so it's not fair to make people work in those conditions. But at the same time, you then say, well, if you're automating these jobs, you're taking people's jobs away. So they kind of can't win unless you treat your people properly. And who wants to do that?
So the future basically is in robot service technicians.
I think so. Or in robots bossing people around and making them, piss in jars. Maybe that's the compromise.
Well,
No
moving
comment.
right along from that happy topic, that went dark really, really fast, to a slightly green story. Our soup du jour, it seems to get a nod here every few episodes. The NBN. Adam, it's now wind-powered.
Yes, the jokes really write themselves. The NBN's talking about wind turbines, but it is, if I remember the details of this story correctly, it's not like huge wind farms out in Bass Strait to run the whole thing. It's more like emergency power in remote areas that are likely to have things cut off. So it's about resilience in the network and reducing people being cut off in the event of some kind of emergency or disaster. So it sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, it actually seems like it's, on the surface when it came through, I'm like, oh, this is, as you said, this writes itself. But then when you look into it, you kind of realize that it was a really good initiative, it seems like.
Yeah, they started trialing it in Geelong, and probably somewhere like Ballarat. I would pick the places where you get a lot of wind, rough weather, and it could really work well.
And somewhere that's closer to the areas that it's trying to serve in emergency times, I guess. Places that are known for being bushfire hotspots is the first example that comes up.
Yeah.
In our next quick news item, I believe I'm talking to two people who, as of last week, would have had blue ticks next to their Twitter handles, but as of this week, I don't think quite met the bar to keep them. It's a little segment we may as well call This Week in Elon Stupidity.
I'm not a celebrity. Get me out of here.
Indeed, because having said, no, you'll only get a blue tick if you pay for it, basically nobody did. I mean, certainly out of Twitter's user base, nobody did. And then Elon kind of reversed and said, well, hang on, beep, 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 beep. If you're a celebrity of certain standing, we will pay for your blue tick even if you don't want it. Asha, is this just Elon being Elon yet again?
Oh, I swear this man should stop. When he thinks of something, he needs to stop, take 3 steps back, and then return to the idea he had a week ago to then flesh that out before moving on to something else. He just, honestly...
But the idea he had a week ago was pretty awful.
It was also
too.
pretty bad.
But flesh that out, right? Don't just implement something super quick and move on. But no, this I guess, fake blue tick endorsement or whatever, it's come under fire for being fake endorsement, right? He's basically saying that this celebrity endorses what I am doing, which is kind of illegal in America. So good luck there, pal.
And he's given them to dead people as well, which is questionable on a whole other level.
Yeah, and kind of infamously dead people, because I believe Jamal Khashoggi was one of the ones who got a blue tick, and that's just all kinds of alarm bells stupid.
Chadwick Boseman was the first one that I saw as well. And
not good. But in good news, if you're TikTok, a study says that TikTok's data collection purposes are no worse than anyone else. Now, that's according to an official report commissioned by, let me check my notes here. Commissioned by TikTok. Asha, how good is this study?
It's so good. So TikTok, and I have no other, I have to, great, right? Great, TikTok. Thank you for telling me that what you are doing is fine because everybody else is. It's that all, if your friends jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge thing that your mum used to say to you. Honestly, I opened the email and I had to read it again because I thought for sure that this was not TikTok's PR that sent it to me. I thought it was anyway. But yes,
the Onion's
TikTok
PR
says it's
had
fine.
sent it to you, basically.
Right. I'm shaking my head. I was just honestly, this was.
It's just it's the old Google do no evil, except it's just look, everyone else is doing evil, and we're only doing as much evil as they are.
Do no more evil than anybody else.
Look, it was also the throw under the bus report. They really felt the need to go hard on every other company, and then also copied and pasted the data collection policies or kind of disclaimers from the likes of Optus, Telstra, Afterpay, Commonwealth Bank, ANZ Bank as well. It was just a copy paste of that with no further context except to say, see, it's right there. They can hand your data over too.
So is there a positive to this? I mean, it feels ludicrous. It does. But is there a positive to this in the sense that it is making more people aware, hey, these data collection policies exist? Because let's be honest here, pretty much everyone just clicks through, does not read them. If they're forced to check a box to say, yes, I've read them, they're lying because they just want to get to the product or service. Is it a good idea to shine a little light on all of this?
Yes, but also I do think that there is importance in highlighting that Facebook, Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, they would have very similar policies to TikTok in their own home country. It just so happens that their home country's government is the United States and not China. And I think that this starts to highlight that we might not just be talking about an issue of data collection and privacy, that there are greater societal issues that we're really is ingrained in our dislike for TikTok collecting our data. I think if there's any positive, that might be that as well.
And that, folks, was the not entirely rapid at all rapid news desk here at Vertical Hold. Enjoying the show? That's great. Don't forget to subscribe, which you can do on every podcast platform you've ever heard of. Just search for Vertical Hold or go to our website, verticalhold.com.au, where we've got handy buttons for every single podcast platform.
So, Asha, we've been talking about scams, and as we all know, one of the ways that scammers try to reach you these days is via SMS, because it's short and it's sharp, and you would expect, my CityLink, whatever you want to call them, the car tolls, I haven't paid that, I'll click on this link, or a courier says they couldn't drop off a parcel, so it's very easy to catch people. They're talking about introducing a new registry that might help crack down on these kind of scams. What are they talking about and how might it work?
Yeah, so it comes ahead of the federal budget, which is a fortnight from last Tuesday, so just over a week, I guess. But anyway, there's a $10 million boost for the ACMA to stand up this registry that I believe is going to be called the SMS Sender ID Registry. So details are pretty scant on exactly what it's going to do, but it seems like it'll do what it says on the tin, right? The likes of Australia Post or LinkT or any kind of postal service, I guess, whatever telco would put a list of numbers that they would be using to communicate with their customers into this registry. And then the telcos would then go, okay, well, this number, they're pretending to be that company. We're going to block it because it's not an approved number. And I guess then keep a hold of those numbers for future blocking to share with one another. So it's kind of this sharing of knowledge, which I think is needed.
So it's not just the idea of giving, we'll say, Telstra and Optus a blue tick, so when their messages come out, you know that they're real. It's actually the capability for them to behind the scenes go, well, this one's claiming to be from Telstra, but it doesn't match any of the numbers that Telstra have registered as the numbers they send from, so therefore we're going to block it. And you won't even see it.
Exactly. And I mean, hopefully if Telstra has, let's just say, Telstra's a bad example to use because they are a telco, but just say Australia Post is using 10 very specific numbers that it will be using for communication. Anything else that's outside of that also has the word Australia Post or Oz Post, I guess there'll be those kind of little blockers that will come through and send a ping to the telcos before those messages go out to customers and be blocked at the source.
I have a concern here, just from a logistical point of view, and obviously we do not yet know enough about how this system is going to work. But obviously it relies on a certain quantity of scanning SMSs for these flags. Now, again, let's block the scammers. That's always a good thing. But if I happen to send Asha an SMS saying, I've put that parcel in the post, but it might take a little while to reach Australia. Well, that's got our Australia Post flag words in there. Suddenly my SMS gets blocked. Maybe my entire phone service gets blocked, depending on what the punitive measures they can take, despite having an innocent message. And I wonder about the rights to appeal there for false positives.
How would you even know? if
Yeah,
you've
well,
been
exactly.
caught
Well,
up in it.
unless suddenly I can't make a call out because I've been blocked because they've caught up to my scammy ways. I am still legitimately me, by the way, Adam. Still send that cryptocurrency, but equally, it feels like there are loopholes in this that are classic scammer loopholes. Uh, all I'd really need to do is pretend to be from my brand new telco Telestra, and
Oh
someone.
yeah, they're
eh,
great. They're fantastic.
It sounds stupid and you laugh, but this whole thing of misspelling, it's been a scammer's playground for years. And people who are panicked, especially if they say, we're about to cut off your Telestra account. Well, they're not necessarily going to auto flag that because we are talking an automated system here. That this 10 million bucks would not pay for enough people to manually scan all this stuff.
The only thing I can think of there, and also perhaps I would send my mum a text message saying, "Hi, mum, I'm broke. Send me money." But I'm not, mum, if you're listening. But I guess they would then also look at, and it comes down to this kind of how close to real time would you allow this to happen? Again, with only $10 million. But it could also then scan to see just how many times Alex and I have communicated via text to see whether he is a known contact or whether he's really from Telestra. That could also be a way around it, but
That'd be taking it to a next level, though, rather than looking at individual messages. And once you start doing that, there'd be privacy concerns and stuff like that. I actually think that maybe a better way of doing it is to look at the exact wording of the messages and say, has this text message, this exact wording, been sent out, 500,000 times in the last 48 hours?
The last 48 seconds in
the last
some
48
cases.
seconds. I mean, it was just like an interesting example. We bought another puppy in my family this week, and we went to pick up the puppy from the breeder. And she started talking about, I think we're talking about the online ad and stuff like that. And she said how many scammers she gets every time she puts a puppy up for sale. And it's people like, oh, I live on an oil rig, so I can't come and pick up the dog, but I really want the dog. I'll send you the money via whatever, but you got to send me some money. Like the usual kind of scam to try and get money out of her. But she says that when she puts up an ad, within 5 or 10 minutes, she gets the exact same email with the exact same wording from 5 different accounts. It's, one's from Bruce, one's from Sally, one's from Joe, but the wording is exactly the same. So if you were trying to pick those things out, just the volume of those messages have been sent within a certain time frame, I think you'd be pretty safe there. You wouldn't get too many false positives.
There is another little issue, which I only spotted because the Communications Alliance basically put out a fairly bland statement saying, oh, yes, we support this in principle, but, and their but was an important one, it's not actually going to be a mandatory framework. It's a voluntary one. You have to sign up to it.
Love voluntary things.
Oh, I thought you meant voluntary for the telcos. Voluntary for people.
They're saying that it's a voluntary framework. Now, I don't have a whole lot more detail on it than that, and seeing that in a single news report that way. But if you don't have to be a signatory to it, then I love the idea of stopping people of stopping SMS scams. But I think history has shown us anything that a business doesn't have to do that will seem to save it money immediately, they'll go down that road rather than the one that costs them money.
Oh, so it's not optional to opt in for end users. It's optional for businesses to opt in.
Yeah, but it means your users can get scammed by someone pretending to be your business.
Because you haven't opted into this scheme and said, I want you to protect my brand name.
Putting your numbers down.
Yeah.
You've
got to start naming and shaming people then.
Well, you've got to start deciding what scale is important then too, it occurs to me. I mean, if, Adam and I both, and Vertical Hold for what it's worth, count as a small business, does that mean that we would be forced to sign up to it in the same way that an Australia Post would be? Is it a scale thing? Is it a numbers thing? I don't know. And I don't know that these are easy problems to solve. So if the Princess Bride has taught me anything, it's that Australia is a land entirely populated by criminals. It's been a long while since we've done a piracy story because piracy sort of felt like one of those news stories that we were writing about and talking about 5-10 years ago in large numbers. And now in a streaming age, it seems to not be the case. But there's a new report that suggests that, well, a fairly large proportion of us are still pirates, and we're pirates putting ourselves at huge risk What's the story here, Adam?
Our good friends at Creative Content Australia have put out a report saying that they think that there are a lot of people still scamming and that a lot of them are using VPNs. So maybe we should crack down on VPNs even more. And a lot of them are using DNS. And hey, Google's DNS is popular. Maybe we should have a go at them. And, a lot of people who pirate get viruses and all kinds of scary things. So maybe we should, to protect the people from the viruses and from themselves and from the scams and from the monsters lurking in the closet, we should crack down on pirates more. I think, Asha, does that sound like a rough summary of the report?
Absolutely. But my response to that is play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? You know what you're getting into. If you are going to the trouble of installing a VPN, logging into that VPN, going to the piratebay.org, typing in Law and Order SVU, season 24, downloading that via views, you know exactly what you were doing and it's onto you. That was very specific. I don't know where that example came from.
Law and Order SUV. Yeah. I'd watch the hell out of that.
Yep, it's just a car. Olivia Benson in a massive car trying to navigate New York City.
Some of the, with a dead body at the start of every episode in the boot, found by joggers. Some of their stats didn't quite seem to add up to me. The one that really jumped out at me is they said 72% of adults who have downloaded pirate content have been hacked, defrauded, or had a virus or ransomware installed on their device. And I originally thought, but how many of them are actually related to pirating and how many was just a coincidence? But they actually used the phrase while pirating. So they reckon that, 3/4 of people who pirate stuff have been hacked, defrauded, virus, ransomware. But then when you look down into the stats about why people have cut back on pirating, 6% of people say they pirate less now because they got a virus. So that to me doesn't quite stack up.
But then they use that figure to then say that 6.3 million Aussies aged over 13 have experienced cybersecurity issues while pirating because they've taken census data and taken that 75% figure, I think you said, and then put it onto the whole of the population.
Yeah.
But also, I've had my data caught up in a few breaches. I've actually had my passport stolen while overseas. Then I got tried to get used entering Texas at another time by someone else. So they probably have my identity there. Anyway, how do these people know that this alleged hacking or stealing of data is occurring at the same time as them pirating? Unless they're pirating 24/7, just constantly, nonstop. I don't think that was potentially the best question to ask. Maybe I have had my data stolen and I'd also pirated in the last month. Not putting apples and oranges together perhaps could have been the better way there.
Well, we don't have the questions, and this is always the problem with surveys like this. If you don't have access to the questions, you don't know how they've slanted. And I always wonder with things like this, how many people are going to really honestly say, oh, yeah, I pirate lots of things all the time. It's what I do. In one sense, you have to be fairly daft. In another sense, look, actually, a lot of people do view this as a victimless crime, and they'll quite happily say it. To get back to your Weird Al example, I went and saw him in concert, and he was talking about his biopic, which came out in the States, I think it was like October, November last year, only officially came to Australia in March, which was when he was doing his live shows here. And he queried how many people in the audience had seen it before March, and this huge roar comes up from the crowd of people who have just en masse admitted to pirating it. And he just looked at them and went, you naughty, naughty people. But you can do whatever you like. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, no. I was just going to say the exact same thing happened during our lockdown, the Sydney lockdown, and probably one of Melbourne's 20, when June came out in the US and Australia had to wait a few months. And this kind of practice had not happened for a few years. If we got a movie after the US, it was like a day to maybe a week max, but we were seeing this kind of months-long stretch of difference, and people were happy, it seems, to go back to those kind of like cam shot pirate videos from cinemas that I don't know how I used to watch them. But
allegedly you used to watch them.
allegedly on someone else's computer. But it just seems that this is somewhat out of the blue with no Yeah, I don't want to say it was for nothing, but it was just kind of like, what questions exactly were asked, and there was also another stat that made me go, wow! All of a sudden, there was a large amount of people that were in the category of household income of 90,000 or more, and initially I went, oh wow, it's people on higher, the high end of income town are pirating the most, and then I realized that just needs two people in the house on 45,000 a year to be in the highest bracket of. So of course that's going to be the majority of the adult
That's the average
population
income. It's like
versus
$50,000. Yeah.
yeah,
Or
when you put
rich
two
people,
people together.
Yeah.
Rich people stay rich by not spending money.
Well, there's also that.
Also, rich people might be more tech savvy and might have figured out how to do it as well.
But and this is where you get into that kind of weird, you can prove whatever you like with stats. Looking at their numbers here, the Australian pirate is male, under the age of 29, earns over $90,000, but only has a TAFE or diploma level qualification. So basically very rich plumbers, I guess, are like very, very bad pirates, something like that.
But plumbing also, might get boring. Maybe they need things to watch.
Exactly, like Law and Order SUV.
Yeah.
SUV. But look, there's also the fact that if you're using so VPN, good VPNs cost money. We all know this because you get
free
what
VPNs
you pay for.
Are dodgy.
Cost you, yeah.
Yeah.
You get what you pay for. If there is nothing for free. If you are not paying, you're selling something else to them, giving something else to them as the trade. So I would love to know how many of these people that said yes that they had experienced these cybersecurity situations or scenarios were using a free VPN versus one that they have to pay for, because that's also important.
It is. And I think the other big problem I have here is there are many very legitimate uses for VPNs, which this ignores. I mean, if you have to use a network which is not your own, basically, you should be using a VPN to keep your own data secure, for example. I mean, that's a very bland example of it. But there's plenty of actually quite good and qualified uses for VPNs. And yeah, I opened this segment by kind of saying that it felt like a 5-10-year-old story. And the conclusions that they're drawing feel like 5-10-year-old scare campaigns to me.
Absolutely. You should be worried about your data on every single website app you use, not just when you're using a VPN and downloading illegal content.
We're not advocating for people downloading illegal content, just in case there are lawyers listening. But yeah, it's broader than that. And that security picture is broader than that now, especially, in the modern age where there's so much more exposure to all of it, which is something, we've been talking about on this podcast, it feels like forever.
I would have liked to see a bit more granular detail in the questions to try and understand the types of content that people are pirating and why. It breaks it down into very broad categories. The highest category is new release movies, and that's around about 45% of people. After that is new release TV shows, which is about 40%. But what I really would like to know is that new releases in, okay, well, all the shows I watch are now spread across 8 different platforms, and it just got to the point where I was not going to pay for the 8th platform to watch one show. Or are those new release movies, as Alex says, a movie that came out here before it came out somewhere else and I didn't have a reason to watch it? Or is it one of those a legitimate way to watch it? Or is one of those things where there's a pricing differentiation? Once you drill down in that, some people are just pirates and they just steal because it's almost like a political statement to them. I don't pay for things. But for other people, there are reasons why they pay for some things and not other things. And the stats have made it very clear in the past that the people who steal things also pay for things. It's very rare that they don't. So I like to see break down into the logic of, okay, why do you pay for this and not pay for that? And if they actually looked into that, they might get a better understanding of why people are pirating and then how the market can meet those people and bring them back into the fold, rather than, as you say, playing these ridiculous scare campaigns of the boogeyman's going to come and get you if you pirate.
We had a quick chat about this, and something that came up by a few people was that there are a few people that said they may or may not still download things that are shown on the likes of commercial television. What they did say was, if some of those commercial television apps, catch-up apps, if they could pay for a tier that didn't have ads, they would pay for that tier and not download the show that they've got the rights to. So I do think it comes down to a lot of just people hate ads as well. Out of this small group of people, which was, substantially smaller than the size that were surveyed for this, and it was a much quicker chat, but that came up as a recurring theme, that it's not necessarily that people are wanting to steal content. They would pay for it. It's just that the avenues that are available in Australia comes with a lot of ads.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Asha for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me. It's glad to be back. It's glad to be back. I'm glad to be back. It's good to be back, and I'm glad to be back.
We've fallen back into scammer text speak.
Yes. SUV.
And now...
Never going to live that down.
And now it's time, as it usually is, for the Vertical Hold 3 Questions of Doom. And as usual, I will ask all 3. You can answer in any order you like. Where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on whichever piece of social media you choose to inhabit? And given your status as one of Australia's leading technology writers across multiple sites now, what's your favourite story you've ever written?
The first one is, you can find me and my things at gizmodo.com.au. I do have a Twitter account that is now basically just used to message you guys. But if you want to follow my doing nothing, it is at Asha B with 5 E's, because 4, 3 and 2 were taken back in 2009 already. So I had to opt for 5 E's. Long, unsolicited story no one asked for. I know.
7 and just write out.
Too ridiculous. I'd get blocked for being a scam account. But I'm going to answer this with something that came up recently that actually brought a little tear to my eye. So it was back when Robodebt was kind of emerging. Chris Duckett and myself over at ZDNet, we covered it a lot. An absolute lot. It seems like at least once a week we were covering at least one story. For the Robodebt Royal Commission, one of my articles got entered into evidence, and
nice.
I kind of had a moment to kind of just stop and go, hang on, we have the opportunity to do something good, not just shit talk a report from TikTok. You do have the opportunity to do something good.
There's room for all of those things.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's probably not necessarily the best story I've ever written, but I think it's kind of been the most impactful, because it's hope it's gone some way to help victims have some sort of closure to this awful thing.
That is awesome. Good journalism should always be kind of applauded and called out. And while we continue to shit talk TikTok and other things, you can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter, for as long as Twitter is there, on Instagram, on the Vertical Hold Facebook page, or on the web at verticalhold.com.au.
And thanks for dropping by, regardless of where you stole the podcast from. We're happy to have you here. Drop us a line and let us know what you think about what we talked about on the episode, and maybe what we can do better in 2023.